Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West. Thank you for joining me for First Stage Friday. Today's the day, folks, the 19th episode on Of Tuor and his coming to Gondolin. It's taken us since the first week of June, but we're finally there. Now, last week we made our way through the final two gates, the Golden Gate and the more recently built final gate, the Gate of Steel. We also saw the mighty Ecthelion, Lord of the Fountains. And that's where we'll pick up, with Elemmekil saluting the Warden of the Great Gate and introducing Voronwë and the stranger. Then Ecthelion turned to Tuor, but he drew his cloak about him and stood silent, facing him. And it seemed to Voronwë that a mist mantled Tuor, and his stature was increased, so that the peak of his high hood overtopped the helm of the Elf Lord, as it were the crest of a gray sea wave riding to the land. But Ecthelion bent his bright glance upon Tuor, and after a silence he spoke gravely, saying, "You have come to the last gate. Know then that no stranger who passes it shall ever go out again, save by the door of death. Speak not ill-boding. If the messenger of the Lord of Waters go by that door, then all those who dwell here will follow him. Lord of the Fountains, hinder not the messenger of the Lord of Waters." Then Voronwë and all those who stood near looked again in wonder at Tuor, marveling at his words and voice. And to Voronwë it seemed as if he heard a great voice, but as of one who called from afar off. But to Tuor it seemed that he listened to himself speaking, as if another spoke with his mouth. For a while, Ecthelion stood silent, looking at Tuor, and slowly awe filled his face, as if in the gray shadow of Tuor's cloak he saw visions from far away. Then he bowed and went to the fence and laid hands upon it, and gates opened inward on either side of the Pillar of the Crown. Then Tuor passed through, and coming to a high sward that looked out over the valley beyond, he beheld a vision of Gondolin amid the white snow. And so entranced was he that for long he could look at nothing else, for he saw before him at last the vision of his desire out of dreams of longing. Thus he stood and spoke no word. Silent upon either hand stood a host of the army of Gondolin. All of the 7 kinds of the 7 gates were there represented, but their captains and chieftains were upon horses, white and gray. Then, even as they gazed on Tuor in wonder, his cloak fell down, and he stood there before them in the mighty livery of Nevrast. And many were there who had seen Turgon himself set these things upon the wall behind the high seat of Vinyamar. Then Ecthelion said at last, "Now no further proof is needed, and even the name he claims as son of Huor matters less than this clear truth, that he comes from Ulmo himself." Now that would appear to leave us a lot of time in the episode for discussion, but as you'll see, there's actually some more text buried in the footnotes, though it would be hard to read, as Christopher points out that right before Ecthelion speaks, from this point, the carefully written, though much amended manuscript ceases, and the remainder of the narrative is hastily scribbled on a scrap of paper. And that's just the narrative through the end of what we read, because there's more after that. Christopher explains, "There remain only some hasty jottings indicating the course of the story, but I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't tell you what those hasty jottings included. Tuor asked the name of the city and was told its 7 names. Christopher points out that it is notable, and no doubt intentional, that the name Gondolin is never once used in the narrative until the very end. Always it is called the Hidden Kingdom or the Hidden City. Ecthelion gave orders for the sounding of the signal, and trumpets were blown on the towers of the Great Gate, echoing in the hills. After a hush, they heard far off answering trumpets blown upon the city walls. Horses were brought, a gray horse for Tuor, and they rode to Gondolin." And yes, I want to see all these moments. This is the story I most wish Tolkien had finished, not only because of what we've already seen, but because of what comes next. Christopher writes that a description of Gondolin was to follow, of the stairs up to its high platform and its great gate, of the mounds, Christopher says that this word is uncertain, of malorns, birches, and evergreen trees, of the place of the fountain, the king's tower on a pillared arcade, the king's house, and the banner of Fingolfin. Now Turgon himself would appear, tallest of all the children of the world save Thingol, with a white and gold sword in a rule bone ivory sheath, and welcome Tuor. Maeglin would be seen standing on the right of the throne, and Idril, the king's daughter, seated on the left, and Tuor would speak the message of Ulmo, either in the hearing of all or in the council chamber. Now that is a scene I want to read. The arrival of Tuor at Gondolin itself, the place of the fountain, Turgon's house, his white and gold sword in an ivory sheath, the sight of Idril, and even of Maeglin. And then Tuor delivering the message, though we do get that in the Silmarillion version. But wait, there's more. Other disjointed notes indicate that there was to be a description of Gondolin as seen by Tuor from far off, that Ulmo's cloak would vanish when Tuor spoke the message of Turgon, that it would be explained why there was no queen of Gondolin, and that's because Turgon's wife, Elenwe, died in the crossing of the Helcaraxe, and that it was to be emphasized, either when Tuor first set eyes upon Idril or at some earlier point, that he had known or even seen few women in his life. Most of the women and all the children of Anael's company in Mithrim were sent away south, and as a thrall, Tuor had seen only the proud and barbaric women of the Easterlings, who treated him as a beast, or the unhappy slaves forced to labor from childhood, for whom he had only pity. Now, I hadn't thought about that for Tuor, but it makes great sense. Not exposed to women as a child, and only seeing a few, either Easterlings or slaves, when he himself was a slave. I'd also really like to see the development of the relationship between Tuor and Idril, while Maeglin steams on the side. As for the mention of Malorn trees in Gondolin, Christopher also points out that where those trees are mentioned as growing, Numenor, Lindon, and Lothlorien, the text neither suggests nor denies that those trees flourished in Gondolin in the elder days. We can neither confirm nor deny the presence of Malorn trees. Anyway, what an incredible story this has been. I've just enjoyed every single one of these readings. But for now, folks, that is it for today's First Stage Friday. And while I'll get back to Fandom Fridays eventually, it's not going to be next week, right? We've got 2 more weeks in this series, and we're going to go to Of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin in the Silmarillion as we continue this story. In the meantime, if you know anybody who's joined me here for a future Fandom Friday, just email barliament@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout, and more. And then join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we wrap up week 100 with Silmarillion Saturday. Subscribe to the TTT in your podcast apps or the PPP channel on YouTube, and be sure you're following @PrancingPonyPod on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.